I live in a penthouse apartment that overlooks the city, a view I earned by building a real estate empire from the ground up, starting with one small property and leveraging it into a portfolio that included the very skyscraper my tech company, Innovate Sphere, now calls home. To most of the world, I am Olivia Reed, the CEO. But for the last 3 months, to a select team on the 20th floor, I was just Liv, the new hire in the sales department, on a special undercover assignment to understand my company's culture from the inside. I was about to find out that the culture on Mark Jensen's sales team was more toxic than a chemical spill. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The idea had seemed brilliant in the boardroom. We were experiencing a strange pattern of high turnover in what should have been one of our most lucrative departments, enterprise sales. The exit interviews were all frustratingly vague, citing culture and management style without giving any concrete details. My chief operating officer, a man I trusted implicitly, suggested a radical approach. "Go in there yourself, Olivia," he'd said. "They won't recognize you. You're always in executive suites or on international business. Go in as a mid-level hire. See what's really happening." So, I became Liv, a transfer from a recently acquired smaller company, a plausible backstory that explained my familiarity with some of our systems but my newness. To the corporate headquarters, I traded my tailored business suits for business casual attire that was nice but unremarkable. I put on glasses I didn't need and wore my hair in a simple ponytail instead of its usual professional styling. The transformation was surprisingly effective. No one gave me a second glance. I was assigned to the team led by Mark Jensen, the director of sales. On paper, Mark was a superstar. His team always hit their targets, often exceeding them. He was praised in quarterly reports for his aggressive strategies and his team's performance. In person, I quickly learned that his success was built on a foundation of fear, mockery, and a relentless, soul-crushing pressure that squeezed every drop of energy from his subordinates. Mark was the kind of man who commanded attention through sheer volume and an unshakable belief in his own superiority. He was handsome in a generic way, with perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He fostered a work-hard, play-hard culture that, in reality, meant working punishing hours and then being socially obligated to play by going out for drinks where he would hold court, subtly belittling anyone he perceived as a weak link. His right-hand woman was Sarah Davis, a senior associate who mirrored his ambition and his cruelty. She was sharp and competent, but she used her skills to enforce Mark's reign, acting as his eyes and ears, quick to point out others' mistakes while highlighting her own successes. The third key member of the team was Leo Martinez, a young sales coordinator. Leo was bright, earnest, and clearly overwhelmed. He was the team's designated workhorse, buried under a mountain of administrative tasks that Mark and Sarah deemed beneath them. They treated him less like a colleague and more like a personal assistant, sending him on coffee runs and openly mocking his meticulous, color-coded spreadsheets while simultaneously relying on them completely. I saw the spark of potential in Leo, but it was being systematically extinguished by the toxic environment. My role as Liv was to be a quiet observer, to learn the systems and the team dynamics. I intentionally portrayed myself as competent, but not exceptional, eager to learn, but not threatening. This made me largely invisible to Mark and Sarah, which was perfect for my investigation. However, it also made me a target for their particular brand of team building. The current office-wide obsession was a Fitsteps challenge, a corporate wellness initiative where departments competed to see who could log the most steps in a month. The prize was a catered lunch and bragging rights, but Mark had turned it into a gladiatorial contest. "We are not losing to accounting," he announced one morning, his voice booming across the open plan office. "They're a bunch of sedentary number crunchers. We are the elite. We are winners, and winners walk." He had a leaderboard displayed on a large monitor, updated in real time. Our team, the sales striders, was neck and neck with the accounting auditors. Mark checked the board obsessively, pacing and prodding anyone who was having a low-step day. "What's the matter, Davis? Did your feet forget how to move?" He'd bark at Sarah, who would just laugh it off. His comments to Leo were more pointed. "Martinez, your numbers are pathetic. Do you want the auditors to think we're weak? I contributed my steps daily, a decent amount from my walk to and from the subway and moving around the office. But I wasn't an athlete. My numbers were average, placing me near the bottom of our team's roster. This didn't go unnoticed. "Hey, newbie," Mark said, stopping by my desk, leaning over me in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate. "We're a team. That means everyone pulls their weight. Your numbers are dragging us down. We need you to step it up. Literally." Sarah, passing by, smirked. "Some people just don't have the winner's mentality, Mark," she said, loud enough for the whole area to hear. I just nodded meekly. "I'll do my best," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. I owned the ground he was standing on, the chair he was leaning against, the very air he was breathing. But in that moment, as Liv, I was powerless. And I knew that to truly understand the problem, I had to let them see me that way. The stage was set, and I had a sinking feeling that Mark's obsession with a meaningless competition was about to escalate. I had no idea just how far he would go. The final day of the Fitsteps challenge arrived with an almost palpable tension. We were trailing the accounting auditors by about 50,000 steps, a significant but not insurmountable margin. Mark was practically vibrating with competitive rage. He spent the entire morning stalking around the 20th floor, glaring at the leaderboard, and snapping at anyone who dared to sit still for more than 5 minutes. "Every step counts," he bellowed. "Take the stairs to the bathroom on 21. Walk to the deli across the street for lunch. Not the one in the lobby. I want to see movement." My day was packed with back-to-back training modules, a key part of my new hire persona. This meant I was stuck at my desk, my step count stagnating. I could feel Mark's eyes on me every time he passed. Around 2 p.m., he called an impromptu team huddle around the leaderboard monitor. The gap had widened slightly. He looked furious. "This is unacceptable," he hissed, his gaze sweeping over the team before landing squarely on me. "Liv, your numbers have barely budged all day. You're in last place. You're the gap." My face flushed with a mixture of feigned embarrassment and genuine anger. "I've been in mandatory training modules since 9 a.m., Mark," I said, keeping my voice level. "I haven't had a chance to—" He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Excuses don't win prizes. Results do." He then turned to the rest of the team. "I have a client meeting on the 65th floor in an hour. I need the final pitch deck. It's on my desktop." He paused for dramatic effect. "The elevators are down for emergency maintenance." A lie, I would later discover. He then turned back to me, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Liv, here's your chance to be a team player. To fill the gap, I need you to run this USB stick up to my client on 65. Take the stairs. That should give us the steps we need to crush those accountants." A stunned silence fell over the team. 65 floors. He was ordering me to climb 65 flights of stairs as a punishment for my low step count, thinly veiled as an urgent work task. Sarah snickered. "Great idea, Mark. That's what I call proactive problem solving." Leo looked at me with wide, sympathetic eyes, a silent apology he was too afraid to voice. I knew I could refuse. I could quit on the spot and walk away. But that would mean my entire 3-month investigation was for nothing. I wouldn't have the undeniable proof I needed of just how toxic his leadership was. I had to see this through. I had to experience the rot firsthand. Taking a deep breath, I stood up and took the small USB stick from his outstretched hand. "Okay," I said, my voice quiet. "For the team." Mark's grin widened. "That's the spirit. Go on, chop, chop!" We're burning daylight. As I walked toward the fire escape door, I heard him say to Sarah in a stage whisper, "Let's see if the newbie has any grit." The stairwell was cold, gray, and smelled faintly of dust and concrete. The emergency lights cast long, eerie shadows. The first 10 flights were easy enough. By the 20th, my calves were starting to burn. By the 30th, my breathing was ragged, and I had to pause, leaning against the cold steel railing. My business-casual loafers were not designed for this. A blister was already forming on my heel. I thought about the absurdity of the situation. I was climbing the stairs of a building I owned, a state-of-the-art skyscraper with some of the fastest elevators in the city, all to appease the ego of a mid-level tyrant who had no idea who I was. The anger was a fuel, pushing me onward. Floors 40 through 50 were a blur of pain and exhaustion. My legs felt like lead, my lungs were on fire, and sweat was dripping into my eyes. I stopped again, slumping against the wall on the 48th floor landing. I just wanted to quit, to call building security and have them open the doors, to ride my private elevator up to my penthouse and put an end to this charade. But then I thought of Leo, and of all the other employees who might have quit because of bullies like Mark. If I gave up, Mark would just spin it as me being weak, another failed hire who couldn't handle the pressure. He would use it to justify his methods. I pushed myself off the wall and kept climbing. The final 15 floors were agonizing. Each step was a monumental effort. When I finally stumbled through the door onto the 65th floor, I was a mess. My blouse was soaked with sweat, my hair was sticking to my face, and my legs were trembling uncontrollably. A man in a sharp suit was waiting by the reception desk. He looked surprised to see me emerge from the stairwell. "Can I help you?" he asked, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. I realized he must be Mark's client. I handed him the USB stick, my hand shaking. "From Mark Jensen," I gasped, too out of breath to say more. He took it, looking even more bewildered. "Thank you." "Are you all right? You look—" He trailed off, not wanting to be rude. "Fine," I managed to say. "Just took the stairs." The journey down was almost as bad, my exhausted leg muscles screaming with every step. I took the elevator from the lobby back to the 20th floor. When I walked back into the office, nearly an hour and a half after I'd left, the sales team erupted in sarcastic applause. Mark was standing on a chair, a triumphant look on his face. "She did it!" he shouted. "Look at her! A true team player." He pointed to the monitor. We were now ahead of the accountants by a few thousand steps. Thanks to Liv's heroic effort, we're back on top. Sarah handed me a bottle of water, her expression dripping with condescending pity. "You look like you wrestled a bear," she said with a laugh. I ignored her and limped to my desk, my entire body aching, the humiliation burning hotter than the physical pain. I had played my part. I had endured the insult. And in doing so, I had given Mark Jensen all the rope he would ever need to hang himself. The rest of the afternoon passed in a painful haze. I sat at my desk, trying to look busy while my leg muscles seized up, and the blister on my heel throbbed with every tiny movement. The team was giddy with their victory in the step challenge. Mark had ordered pizzas to celebrate, and the mood was boisterous. But I felt a cold, hard knot of fury solidifying in my chest. The physical toll was one thing, but the public degradation was another. Mark hadn't just asked me to do something difficult. He had orchestrated a spectacle to assert his dominance and humiliate me for his own amusement. Around 4:30 p.m., my body stiff and aching, I decided I needed to get some fresh air and clear my head. I pushed myself up from my chair, the simple act of standing sending a jolt of pain up my legs. I limped slowly toward the break room, hoping to grab a cup of tea and find a quiet corner. The break room on our floor was a large, open space with a kitchen area at one end and some couches at the other. As I approached, I heard voices coming from inside, Mark and Sarah. They hadn't seen me. I paused just outside the doorway, concealed by a large potted plant. Their words, carried on waves of triumphant laughter, rooted me to the spot. "I can't believe she actually did it," Sarah was saying, her voice high with amusement. 65 floors. "I thought she was going to cry when you told her. Her face was priceless." "Priceless is right," Mark replied, and I could hear the smug satisfaction in his tone. "That's how you separate the wheat from the chaff. You apply pressure, you see who breaks. She didn't break, I'll give her that. But man, did you see her when she got back? Looked like she'd been dragged through a hedge backward." "Best part is," Sarah added, her voice dropping to a more conspiratorial level, "the elevators weren't even broken. My blood ran cold." I knew it. I had suspected it, but hearing her confirm it so gleefully was like a punch to the gut. Mark let out a booming laugh. "Of course they weren't. I just called my buddy in maintenance and had him slap an out-of-service sign on the doors for our elevator bank for a couple of hours. He owes me a favor, easy. The look on her face thinking she had no choice. That was the real prize. Better than a free lunch." "You're terrible," Sarah said, though she was clearly delighted. What if she had complained? What if she went to HR? And say what? Mark scoffed. "My boss asked me to deliver a file and I'm not fit enough to take the stairs." She'd look like a whiner. It was a perfect test. It shows the team I'm serious about winning. It puts the new girl in her place, and it gets us the steps we needed. That's what I call management, Sarah. It's a chess game, and people like her are just pawns. I had heard enough. The calculated cruelty of it all was breathtaking. It wasn't just a spontaneous bad decision fueled by competition. It was a premeditated act of bullying. They had conspired to create the situation, lied about the circumstances, and were now gloating about my suffering. The physical pain from the climb was nothing compared to the sharp, icy clarity that now filled my mind. My investigation was no longer just about observing a toxic culture. It had become deeply personal. I backed away silently from the doorway, my limp now forgotten, replaced by a rigid, controlled posture. I walked back to my desk, my mind racing. I sat down and pulled up my personal email on my phone, careful to shield the screen from view. I sent a short, encrypted message to my chief operating officer. It read, Phase 1 complete. The problem is worse than we imagined. Initiating Phase 2. I need full access to security and network logs for the 20th floor, effective immediately. Also, pull the complete personnel files for Mark Jensen and Sarah Davis. I want everything. The reply came back in less than a minute. Access granted. Whatever you need, Olivia. Let me know when you're ready to bring the hammer down. A cold, grim sense of purpose settled over me. Mark thought he was playing chess, moving his pawns around on a board he controlled. He had no idea that he wasn't playing against a pawn. He was playing against the queen, and she owned the entire board. He had made a critical error in judgment. He thought he was making an example of Liv, the quiet new hire. Instead, he had just declared war on Olivia Reed, the CEO. And it was a war he was going to lose in the most spectacular fashion I could devise. The whispers in the break room had sealed their fate. They thought they had broken me. In reality, they had just woken a sleeping giant. The game was on. That evening, I did not go back to my penthouse. Instead, I went to a different apartment I kept for out-of-town executives. A comfortable but anonymous space on the other side of the city, where I'd been living during my undercover assignment. The aches in my body were a constant reminder of the day's events, but my mind was sharper and more focused than ever. I spent the first hour stretching my abused muscles and icing my swollen heel. Then I opened my secure laptop and began to work. The view from my temporary apartment was unremarkable, but the view I was about to get into my company's inner workings would be crystal clear. With the full administrative access my COO had granted me, the company's digital infrastructure became my personal playground. I started with the elevator logs. As Mark had bragged, there were no official maintenance requests for the elevator bank serving floors 1530. It had been a complete fabrication. I cross-referenced the logs with security camera footage from the 20th floor lobby. At 1:45 p.m., I found it. Mark, walking over to the elevator call panel with a laminated out-of-service sign, hooking it neatly over the button. He looked around, saw no one was watching, and strode back to his desk with a self-satisfied smirk. The lie was now a documented fact. Next, I accessed the internal communications server. I searched for chat logs between Mark Jensen and Sarah Davis. It didn't take long to find a treasure trove of unprofessional and malicious conversations. They openly mocked their colleagues, including Leo, whom they referred to with a string of derogatory nicknames. They discussed strategies for shifting blame for their own mistakes onto junior employees, and then I found the conversation from the morning of the step challenge. Mark, need a way to close this step gap. Liv is the anchor dragging us down. Sarah, make her run a marathon LAL. Mark, not a bad idea. I have to go to 65 later. I think I'll make her take the stairs. Say the elevators are down. Sarah, OMG, that's evil, I love it. You wouldn't actually do it. Mark, watch me. It's the perfect team-building exercise. Builds character. The chat log was the smoking gun. It proved intent and collusion. It was cold, hard evidence that this wasn't a lapse in judgment, but a calculated act of workplace abuse. I saved a secure copy of the entire conversation. My next stop was human resources. I pulled the complete personnel files for both Mark and Sarah. Mark's file was thick. He had glowing performance reviews, all focused on his aggressive sales numbers. But there were also 3 separate complaints filed against him over the past 5 years from employees who had since left the company. They were all disturbingly similar, mentioning intimidation tactics, a hostile work environment, and management through fear. In each case, Mark had been spoken to, and the issue had been dismissed due to his team's outstanding financial performance. The company had prioritized profits over people, and this was the result. Sarah's file showed a rapid, almost meteoric rise through the ranks. Her performance reviews, all written by Mark, were filled with superlatives. She was a killer instinct salesperson, a loyal asset, and a future leader. It was clear she was his protégé, molded in his toxic image. She hadn't had any formal complaints filed against her, but she was mentioned in one of the complaints against Mark as being an enforcer of his bullying. The final piece of my investigation was the human element. The next day I came into the office as Liv, limping theatrically. Mark and Sarah barely gave me a glance, already focused on their next sales target. During the lunch hour, I saw Leo eating alone in the break room, looking miserable as he scrolled through his phone. I grabbed a yogurt and sat down across from him. "Hey," I said gently. "Rough day yesterday, huh?" He looked up, surprised that I was speaking to him. "Oh, hey, yeah, that was insane. I can't believe Mark made you do that. Are your legs okay?" "They'll recover," I said with a small smile. "Is it always like this? The pressure?" Leo sighed, a wave of exhaustion washing over his young face. He hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Worse," he said in a low voice. "Mark is intense. He gets results, so management loves him, but it's awful working for him. He pits everyone against each other. If you're not one of his favorites, like Sarah, he makes your life a nightmare. He takes credit for your wins and magnifies your losses. I've been trying to transfer to another department for 6 months, but my application keeps getting blocked. I think he's doing it. Why do you stay?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I need the job," he said simply. "My mom is sick and I help with her medical bills. This job pays well and the benefits are good. I just try to keep my head down and survive. But most people don't. We've had 5 people quit the team in the last year." His story solidified everything. The data told me what had happened, but Leo told me why it mattered. His quiet desperation was the human cost of Mark Jensen's winning strategy. This wasn't just about my personal humiliation anymore. It was about dismantling a toxic system that was chewing up good people like Leo and spitting them out. I thanked him for his honesty and told him to hang in there, that things might change sooner than he thinks. He gave me a weak, skeptical smile. As I walked back to my desk, my plan began to form. Firing Mark and Sarah would be easy, but it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't fix the underlying problem, which was a culture that tolerated their behavior in the name of profit. No, they didn't deserve a quiet dismissal. They deserved a consequence as public and humiliating as the one they had inflicted on me. They needed to be made an example of, not for revenge, but for reform. I had all the evidence I needed. It was time to stop investigating and start planning. Mark Jensen liked to play chess, but he was about to find out what it feels like to be checkmated. For the next 2 days, I continued my charade as Liv, the meek and sore-legged new hire. I kept my head down, completed my tasks, and gave Mark and Sarah no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. They, in turn, treated me with a dismissive indifference, my 65-floor ordeal already a forgotten piece of office lore. They were arrogant, secure in their positions, and completely oblivious to the storm that was gathering just above their heads. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Olivia Reed was setting the stage. My first call was to the head of building operations. "David," I said, my voice crisp and authoritative, "I need to schedule a comprehensive building-wide test of the fire stairwell pressurization system. It's a critical safety check that we've had on the books for a while. Let's schedule it for this Friday at 2 p.m. It will require a complete shutdown of all elevator systems, including service and executive elevators, for a minimum of 2 hours. No exceptions." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ms. Reed, that's highly disruptive. A 2-hour building-wide elevator shutdown on a Friday afternoon?" "I'm aware, David," I replied coolly. "It's a matter of safety compliance. Inform all tenants that it's a mandatory, non-negotiable state safety inspection. Send out the official building-wide memo this afternoon." "Yes, Ms. Reed. Right away." My next step was to orchestrate the meeting itself. I had my executive assistant send out a calendar invitation to a select group of people. The invitees included my entire C-suite, the board of directors, the head of human resources, and the entire sales team from the 20th floor, including Mark, Sarah, and Leo. The subject line was stark and attention-grabbing. Urgent and mandatory, all-hands meeting, regarding corporate culture and performance. The location was listed as the Skyview Conference Room, 65th floor. The time was set for Friday at 2:30 p.m. The beauty of the plan was in its subtlety. The elevator shutdown was a building-wide issue, seemingly unrelated to the meeting. The meeting itself was framed as a high-level corporate strategy session. No one would connect the dots until it was far too late. The memo about the safety inspection went out to the entire building an hour later. I watched from my desk as the email notification popped up on everyone's screen. Mark glanced at it and scoffed. Great, some stupid drill. Just what we need on a Friday. He was annoyed, but not suspicious. On Friday morning, I arrived at the building early, but I didn't go to the 20th floor. My time as Liv was over. I went to my penthouse, showered, and put on one of my most powerful outfits, a sharp, dark navy suit with impeccable tailoring. I styled my hair professionally and put on the subtle but expensive watch I usually wore. When I looked in the mirror, Liv was gone. Olivia Reed, CEO, was back. At 1:45 p.m., I took my private elevator down to the 65th floor. The Skyview Conference Room was my pride and joy. A massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking 360-degree view of the city. I had the catering team set up a simple beverage station with ice water and coffee. Then, I had the AV team do a final check of the room's massive central screen. They had queued up the files I had sent them. The security footage of Mark placing the fake sign, the chat logs, and a summary of the HR complaints against him. At precisely 2 p.m., the building's elevator systems went dark. An announcement came over the PA system, a calm, professional voice informing everyone of the start of the mandatory safety inspection. From my vantage point on the 65th floor, I could see the entire city spread out before me. I imagined the scene on the 20th floor. Mark and his team would be seeing the meeting reminder pop up on their calendars. They would see the location, 65th floor. They would walk to the elevators and see the official out-of-service signs, this time real and on every single car. The realization would dawn on them slowly at first, then all at once. The only way up was the stairs. 45 flights. I pictured Mark, in his expensive suit and leather-soled shoes, looking at the stairwell door. I pictured Sarah in her stylish but impractical heels. They had a choice. Either defy a mandatory CEO-level summons, a career-ending move, or start climbing. I knew Mark's ego wouldn't let him back down. He would see it as yet another challenge to be conquered. He would rally his team and tell them to suck it up. He would have no idea that he wasn't climbing toward a meeting. He was climbing toward his own execution. I stood by the window, sipping a glass of ice water, and I waited. The view from the top had never been so clear. The trap was set. All that was left was for the rats to walk into it. The members of my C-suite and the board of directors began to arrive just before 2:30 p.m. They had been pre-briefed about the unique circumstances of the meeting and had been given early access to the 65th floor before the shutdown. They were my allies, a jury ready to witness the verdict. They murmured amongst themselves, sipping coffee and looking out at the stunning city views. A low hum of anticipation in the room. I stood calmly at the head of the large boardroom table, my demeanor composed, betraying none of the cold fury that simmered beneath the surface. At 2:45 p.m., the first members of the sales team stumbled through the conference room doors. It started with Leo. He was flushed and breathing heavily, but being young and fit, he seemed more winded than exhausted. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me standing at the head of the table. His eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at my suit, my hair, my confident posture. He was looking at Liv, but seeing Olivia Reed. The recognition and confusion warred on his face. I gave him a small, reassuring nod, and he shuffled uncertainly to a chair at the far end of the room, his mind clearly reeling. Other team members trickled in over the next 10 minutes, each in varying states of dishevelment and exhaustion, their expressions mirroring Leo's shock as they saw me. They took their seats in a stunned silence. Finally, at almost 3 p.m., the main event arrived. The doors swung open, and Mark Jensen staggered in, followed closely by a haggard-looking Sarah Davis. Mark's perfect hair was damp and disheveled. His face was beet red and beaded with sweat. His expensive suit jacket was off and slung over his arm, and his tie was loosened. Sarah looked even worse. She had taken off her heels and was in her stocking feet, her makeup smudged. Mark stopped short when he saw me. He blinked, his brain struggling to process the scene. He saw Liv, the meek subordinate he had tormented, standing at the head of a table occupied by the most powerful people in the company. He looked from me to the board members, his face a mask of utter confusion. "Liv, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice raspy from the climb. "What are you doing up there?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment, enjoying the silent, collective gasp from his team. Then I spoke, my voice calm, clear, and amplified by the room's microphone system. "My name," I said, my eyes locked on his, "is Olivia Reed. I am the CEO of this company, and the owner of this building." The color drained from Mark's face. He looked as if he'd been physically struck. Sarah, standing behind him, let out a small, horrified gasp and swayed on her feet. The entire sales team stared, mouths agape. "Now that we're all here," I continued, gesturing to the 2 empty chairs directly across from me. "Please have a seat." "Mark, Sarah, the meeting is about to begin," numbly. They stumbled to the chairs and sat down, looking like prisoners in the dock. I clicked a remote in my hand, and the giant screen behind me flickered to life. This meeting was called to address a serious issue within our corporate culture, an issue of toxicity, bullying, and a complete failure of management. My gaze remained fixed on Mark. "For the past 3 months, I have been working undercover on your team as Liv. It was an educational experience." The first image on the screen was a crystal-clear security still. It showed Mark, a smug look on his face, hooking the fake out-of-service sign onto the elevator panel. A collective intake of breath went through the room. "Mark, does this look familiar to you?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "This was taken 2 days ago, moments before you ordered me, your supposed subordinate, to climb 65 flights of stairs to fill the gap in a meaningless step competition." I clicked the remote again. The screen now showed the chat logs between him and Sarah, their cruel words magnified for everyone to see. "Make her run a marathon, lol. That's evil. I love it. It's a chess game, and people like her are just pawns." Sarah buried her face in her hands, shaking. Mark stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing silently, no words coming out. "It seems you enjoy playing games, Mark," I said, my voice hardening. "So I thought we could play one more. How did you enjoy your climb today?" 45 flights, wasn't it? I have to admit, it's a little easier from the ground up than starting after you've already been at work all day. I found the climb from 20 to 65 to be particularly grueling. But then again, I didn't have a multi-million-dollar bonus waiting for me. I was just trying to be a team player. I let the weight of my words sink in. The room was deathly quiet. I turned my attention to the head of HR. "James, I believe you have the records of 3 prior complaints against Mr. Jensen for workplace intimidation, all of which were dismissed because his team produced high sales numbers." James nodded grimly. "That is correct, Ms. Reed." I turned back to Mark. He was pale, his bravado completely shattered. He was finally seeing the board, not as a collection of squares he could manipulate, but as a solid wall he had just slammed into at full speed. "Your numbers are not an excuse for abuse," I said, my voice ringing with authority. "Your performance is not a shield for your toxicity. You created a culture of fear and intimidation. You bullied your subordinates for sport, and you lied to cover your tracks. You valued a meaningless leaderboard over the dignity of your employees. You, Mark, are the gap in leadership, the gap in integrity, and the gap in basic human decency at this company." I stood up to my full height, and as of this moment, that gap is filled. I looked from his horrified face to Sarah's. "You are both fired, effective immediately. Your network access has been revoked. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the building. You will be allowed to collect your personal belongings from your desks under supervision. Your final paychecks will be mailed to you." It was over. The confrontation was absolute. Mark just sat there utterly broken, the architect of his own spectacular downfall. He had climbed 45 flights of stairs just to be fired in front of the entire company leadership. It was a fitting, humiliating end. The queen had taken the pawn. Checkmate. The silence that followed my announcement was thick and heavy. Mark and Sarah remained frozen in their chairs, the finality of my words washing over them. 2 security guards entered the room discreetly and stood by the door, their presence a quiet confirmation that this was not a negotiation. Finally, Mark seemed to find his voice, though it was a mere shadow of its usual commanding tone. "You can't do this," he whispered, looking around at the impassive faces of the board members. "My numbers. I'm the best director this company has." I didn't even bother to respond to him directly. I simply nodded to the security chief. "Please escort Mr. Jensen and Ms. Davis out of the building." The guards moved forward, and the 2 of them rose unsteadily to their feet. They didn't make a scene. The fight had gone out of them completely. As they were led from the room, their faces were a mixture of shock, humiliation, and dawning realization. They had played a cruel game and lost in the most public way imaginable. The heavy conference room doors clicked shut behind them, leaving the rest of us in a profound quiet. I let the moment settle before turning my attention to the remaining members of the sales team, who all looked terrified, as if they were next in line for the chopping block. My gaze softened as I looked at Leo. "Leo Martinez," I said, and he flinched as if I'd shouted. "Please stand up." He rose slowly, his eyes wide with fear. "In my 3 months on your team," I continued, my voice now warm and encouraging, "I saw you consistently treated with disrespect. I saw you burdened with the work of others, and I saw you endure it with professionalism and quiet dignity. But I also saw your meticulous work, your intelligence, and your untapped potential. Effective immediately, you are being promoted to Interim Director of Sales. You will report directly to the Vice President of Sales. We will provide you with a leadership coach and all the resources you need to succeed. We believe in promoting talent, but more importantly, we believe in rewarding character." Leo stared at me, dumbfounded, his mouth slightly agape. "Me?" he stammered. "But you," I confirmed with a smile. "You represent the kind of leader we want at this company. Someone who leads with competence and kindness, not fear. Congratulations." A smattering of applause broke out from my C-suite, and Leo sank back into his chair, looking utterly overwhelmed but with a new light of hope in his eyes. I then addressed the rest of his team. "The sales striders are being disbanded. We are restructuring the department. Each of you will have one-on-one meetings with HR and the VP of Sales to discuss your future here. This is a fresh start for all of you. We failed you by allowing a toxic manager to remain in power for so long. That ends today." After dismissing the sales team, I turned to my board and executive team. "This incident has exposed a fundamental flaw in how we evaluate success. We have been so focused on the what, the sales numbers, the profit margins, that we have ignored the how.